Welcome to the H series of webinars. This series is aimed at new and aspiring sheep producers to give them a step up into the Queensland sheep industry. This hunger webinar is part 9 of the series and covers how the rumen works, meeting feed requirements, and monitoring the condition score of your animals. This webinar was delivered by Geoff Duddy from Sheep Solutions on the 7th of July 2021. This is clip 1 of 6 and covers the difference between sheep and cattle and how to condition score.
Basically what we'll go through today, I want to spend the first couple of minutes just talking about condition scoring and the importance of monitoring your ewe in particular. We'll go through some digestion basics, talk a bit about energy, protein and fibre, and the feed requirements, or the feed needs depending on the stages of production. Just a few things first up in terms of sheep relative to cattle. Feed tends to pass through the rumen quicker in sheep. They spend about half the time eating compared to cattle, but spend almost 4 times longer chewing or ruminating, which is basically chewing the cud. And that's important. We'll talk about that as we go through, because the importance of roughage in the diet in particular and stimulating that cud chewing. They tend to have drier manures. They actually have more sodium absorbed in the last part of the gut, and they tend to have a higher dry matter content. So you can actually check manures, particularly when supplementary feeding with grains, to see how they're travelling, to see whether or not there's enough roughage in the diet, whether or not you're actually getting some acidosis, which is basically a low pH or acidic conditions in the rumen that cause a few problems. And they tend to have a higher incidence of gut issues compared to cattle. So they're a little bit different for sure. Probably the main one is that they graze a lot closer to the ground than cattle, and they're a lot more selective. And it's an internal problem we have is, estimating paddock feed, and at times we wonder why sheep are still doing okay when maybe the quality or the quantity that we're assessing isn't as good as we think it is. In terms of body condition scoring, look, ultimately production is nutrition driven. Conception and survival to weaning are heavily dependent on new body condition and meeting feed requirements. Nutrient demand varies with the sheep's age, its size, its physiological state, so the state of production, its production efficiency, and environmental factors such as weather conditions. Maintenance is a state where no live weight changes occurs, and basically that's where energy input is the same as energy losses. So maintaining it at a specific stage is really based on the amount of energy they're able to actually harvest or get into the system and what their physiological need is. Requirements compared based on an animal's relative dry sheep equivalent, or DSE status. Okay, so, and it's basically defined as the amount of feed needed by a 2-year-old 50 kilogram dry sheep or wether to maintain its weight. One DSC requires about 8.3 megajoules of energy per day. Right? That's just to stay in a maintenance position. Just want to quickly touch on, there are 2 systems we use here in Australia. One is the GR site, or fat score site, which is basically the second last rib on the long ribs, around about 11 centimetres down. And it's a measure, just using your fingers, basically, measure of the fat depth at that site, and it relates heavily to the yield of an animal. So that's basically what you get back from abattoirs when you send lambs or mutton and the like off to slaughter. And the condition scoring site is on the loin area or the short ribs, and basically it's just a means of palpating that area. It's critical that we get down through the wool, if you're a wool-based breed, and feel at skin level. And the basic process is we're looking to feel how fleshed out this eye muscle area is. So we gently rub that area, and also looking at the amount of fat cover over the end of the loin area, end of the short ribs. To give you a bit of an idea how that feels, condition score 1 to 5. 1 is an emaciated animal, 5 is ultra fat. Most ewes will fall within that condition score 2 and 3 range. If they're on the lower end of that scale, it feels on the end of the short ribs similar to just rubbing across your fingers. If it's around about a mid-range, like condition score 3, you're going to feel like the top of your palm, where you're find it quite hard to actually feel the amount of cover over those short ribs. And if they're ultra fat, it basically feels like the fleshy part of your hand, where you really won't feel any difference between those short ribs.
Thank you for watching this short clip. For more information, please visit www.bleedingsheep.com.au.